Is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Wednesday morning, the 1st of July, 2026. It's exactly 40 minutes past the top of the hour. That's 9 a.m. As you are well aware, because of the World Cup schedule, we keep on tumbling. But nonetheless, it's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful morning. It's a rainy morning down here in Kampala. We've been blessed with some rains after what is felt like a very couple of very hot days. I don't know if it is the same story in the rest of the country, but at least the capital city dwellers will know that we've had some showers. Anyways, this morning we'll continue the conversation on football, particularly around the World Cup and things beyond that, including transfers, where I know majority of you have a special keen interest in. But as we look to make that happen in the wee hours of the morning leading to daylight, Mexico managed to knock out Ecuador after beating them by 2-0. There was a red card in that one, very late in, which was handed to Pierre Hincapi, who became the second player at the World Cup to be sent off for covering his mouth while speaking to an opponent. So that is something. Of course, the first one being Paraguay's Miguel Armenon. So we'll get to discuss that and the implications of it. We'll get to talk about Kylian Mbappe. And the history he continues to write at the World Cup. We'll talk about Netherlands and Ronald Koeman. There's some news there. So that and among other things in today's broadcast. I can see Raymond Kangumba is already back with us, recommending the signing of Johan Manzambi by Newcastle. And I don't know if Newcastle's stance has changed, but their priority was set out on Felix Mencha from Borussia Dortmund, who has also attracted interest from the likes of Manchester United. But only time will tell. I know that Newcastle are never devoid of targets when it comes to those that they want to pursue. However, having the targets and pursuing them to their logical conclusion is often one and two different things. But we'll be hoping against hope that maybe things go their way this time around because the Magpies need to pull themselves out of the doldrums that they have been at in the last couple of, particularly last season. Okay, then, Jesus Christ. I wish to send out my sincere vote of thanks to all of you that were part of last night's podcast, which went on for in the excess of 2.5 hours. Thank you so much for choosing to be part of the discussion, to be part of the conversation. It was really, really much appreciated. So it goes without saying. It goes without saying that your contribution towards the channel is really, really highly appreciated. So where do we start it all this morning? Now, we'll start it on the Ugandan front because our own star boy in Alan Okello is also writing history of his own. In the recently concluded season, of course, the Tanzanian Premier League being one that was recently concluded, he is a champion with young Africans over there in the Tanzania Premier League. And he's won 2 league titles in one season because he joined young Africans. That was in January. After scoring about 4 goals and I think providing 3 assists in the Uganda Premier League with Vipers. Remember, ordinarily the Uganda Premier League kicks off anywhere around August or September. So between September and close of December, he had scored himself 4 goals and provided 3 assists in the Uganda Premier League, and he was Vipers' standout performer or one of the standout players for the eventual Uganda Premier League champions. So by the virtue of that contribution to the Venoms in the Uganda Premier League, he did qualify to earn himself a medal. And he got his championship medal. You remember the final day when they beat up against Express FC by 2-0 to seal, or to, okay, not to seal, they had already won it, but before they were crowned champions on the day. Then he goes on to the Tanzanian Premier League, and obviously, as the case often is when it comes to local stars, we often wonder to ourselves how they are going to perform out there. Blue, is it Bule? Bole says, happy birthday, man. Thanks, Bole, but my birthday was a couple of days ago, but thank you so much for the birthday wishes. Then to run, is it to run says, reading my name? Reading your name is a bit difficult, but anyways, I hope I've tried, and in case I've fallen short, please find it within your heart to, forgive me or indulge me in case you think I should pronounce it much better than that. Anyways, so that's Alan Okello for you, our own star boy. So in the wondering how he would perform, obviously, it wasn't a quick start, but eventually he found his footing and he had the sort of impact he had the sort of impact that you would love him to have. Eventually, he managed to score 14 goals and provide 11 assists, including scoring his first ever hat-trick away from home soil. I think I remember when he, he first scored his hat-trick in the Ghana Premier League in years gone by against Onduparaka when he was still at KCCA. I think that time around they either beat Onduparaka. I think they beat Onduparaka by about 5 goals or more in that game. Turan says, best YouTuber, thank you. Cedric says, good morning. Too bad Olise didn't score last night. I mean, it just happens. Sometimes it just does not happen for you. But he had a really, really impressive game, and we'll get to speak about him. So I wanted to kick off today's broadcast with that note about Alan Okello. So he has won 2 league titles, a Ghana Premier League title and a Tanzanian Premiership title in the same season for his exploits in the Uganda Premier League with Vipers Sports Club and, of course, Young Africans Sports Club over there in Tanzania. He's one of those players. I think he should be in the best moment of his career. He should be in the best moment of his career because we've seen him. He's had his sort of ups and downs, obviously, coming through the ranks at KCCA as a young boy, coming out of Chibuli Senior Secondary School. He was part of KCCA's junior team, and then Coach Mike Mutebi elevated him. He's been around the scene for about 9 years, thereabout. And he did everything you would want him to do in the Uganda Premier League before moving on to the likes of Parado, where he did not have that impressive a career because he struggled with injuries. He was homesick. That sort of adaptability is one that really, really troubled him. And it's to be expected. I see somebody's requesting me to talk about for my thoughts. User is saying my thoughts on Mexico, Ecuador. I'll get to that in a bit. So when he went out there and things did not happen for him, as the case often is for our Ugandan stars, he did return home on home soil. And when he returned, I remember there was contention for his signature. At the time, he had a knee injury. KCCA wanted to resign him, but they could not agree on terms. But initially, he had returned to KCCA on loan from Parado. So, and once they did not agree on terms for KCCA to resign him permanently, by the way, Parado plays in the Algeria's top flight, one of the big teams out there. So Viper Sports Club agreed to take him on. As we know, the former FIFA president, in Dr. Lawrence Mlindwa, he's a hands-on man. He sits down with him, has a conversation, and this is the Alan Okello story, and he agreed to the terms, which included, by the way, facilitating his knee. I think I don't know if he needed surgery, but his knee treatment. It included accommodating, I think, one of his siblings into St. Mary's Chitende. So he did it all for him, and he says he will forever be grateful. I remember the day Vipers were being crowned champions at St. Mary's Stadium, Chitende. He did engage him. That's Dr. Lawrence Mlindwa on a video call at the time. So they have that sort of father kind of son relationship. And as often is with the case with Dr. Lawrence, when he really, really likes or loves a player, he's that very hands-on with his players. And even when things do not go so well for a player at Vipers, rarely do you hear voices of players leaving the club really, really disgruntled or unhappy in the sense of things that did not happen or go well for them when it comes to overall relationship between a club and its top brass, as we often hear the case with other clubs. We've heard of those things at Express, and they're not immune to Express. We've had them elsewhere, but just to mention but a few. So that's ordinarily where the conversation leads. So eventually he has a really, really brilliant season with Vipers. I think that's for the 2024-2025 campaign. And then he starts the second season. And young Africans come in and pay handsomely for him. Of course, Dr. Lawrence Mulindwa agreed to the deal, and they made it happen. So I think maybe even three? I think it was 3 seasons. I think it was about 3 seasons or 2.5 seasons that he spent at Vipers. So he gets signed to Young Africans. And given the sort of performances like he's put in, I wouldn't be surprised if teams out there in the top flight or in bigger clubs anywhere across Africa and beyond are possibly scouting him. Now, usually our players tend to have challenges when they go in North Africa. We've had it with the likes of Emma Okwi and among other players. Mohamed Shaban, who signed for Wydad Casablanca at one point. I don't know what happens really for them. They tend to have challenges in North Africa. But it's also not only immune to North Africa, because sometimes it also happens when they go over there to Europe. Yesterday, we were talking about Elvis Bomono, who was at Aberdeen. I do not know currently where he is playing, but I don't know if it's an orientation issue. I don't know if it's the struggle to adapt, because, transitioning from one environment, especially these transitions that are oftentimes drastic, forget moving within Europe, moving from one continent to another tends to be a bit of a struggle. And it's not only Ugandan players. Shimi says, good morning. Hi, Shimi. It's not only Ugandan players that struggle with that. Even I'll give you an example. Mohamed Trezeguet went to Aston Villa and things never happened for him. So it's not like it's only immune to Uganda. But the point I'm trying to make is that I would want to see more Ugandans thrive out there when they go for those pro contracts. And I'm thinking to myself that at least there must be a club somewhere within Africa, a big club, maybe Esperance, maybe Al Ahly, maybe a Wydad Casablanca that is eyeing Alan Okello, and maybe even beyond. It could be in the Scottish Premier League. I remember as a youngster, they wanted to take him to the Scottish Premier League, but then his minders at the time decided that he was too young to sort of go for those exploits. So eventually he did not go. So maybe it was the right decision, maybe it wasn't, I do not know. I won't speak with absolute certainty on that or commit myself. But oftentimes it can happen in 2 ways. When the opportunity arises, you can choose to take a leap of faith and go for it. Or you can choose to have your reservations and say, maybe now is not the right time. Anyways, guys, in the meantime, I take your vote on that poll question on who you think will advance tonight between England and the Democratic Republic of Congo, because those two will be entertaining us in the early kickoff for tonight at the round of 32. Okay, moving away from Alan Okello, Starboy. Big congratulations to you, Alan Okello. In this world where I seek to have interactions with multiple people, how I wish I could have an interaction with him about his career and the overall game. Anyways, we'll move on for now and discuss football. Somebody asked me about Mexico, Ecuador. Now, I'll be honest with you. I did not get the opportunity to watch. Good morning, Becky. How are you? How are you doing this beautiful morning? It's good to have you back on the broadcast, and I hope you're doing all right. Now, like I was saying, I did not watch the game live. I've caught moments of it from the highlights. I've caught moments of it in the replay. The replay was still ongoing at the time of starting this podcast. And Mexico continued on the same path of being the good team that they have been thus far. Remember, they won all their 3 games at the group stages when they beat South Africa by 2 goals to 0. They beat, I think, South Korea by, was it a goal to 0? And then subsequently beat up against Czech Republic by 3 goals to 0 in the final game of the group stages. Then, at the round of 32, they managed to beat up against Ecuador by 2 goals to 0. Now, I think they are the only team or country at this year's World Cup that are yet to concede a goal. Isn't that impressive? I think it is, because even the biggest of teams have conceded goals. And I cannot stand on any leg to make the argument that maybe they've been up against lesser opponents. That's far from it. When you come up against teams like Ecuador, that's a really, really difficult game. We're talking about an Ecuadorian side that beat up against Germany by 2 goals to 1. When you come up against Czech Republic, that's not an easy opponent with all their pedigree. Never mind that this time round, they're not as good, when you come up against a South Korea and keep a clean sheet, when you come up against a South Africa who had their exploits as well at the competition. So anyways, this guy, Julian Quinones, I mean, for me, he's been one of the standout performers thus far this World Cup. And I think he has about a tally of about 3 goals. I stand to be corrected if it is beyond that or otherwise. But because I remember he scored against South Africa, he scored against Czech Republic, and then he scored in yesterday's game. So he's among those players who I want to think have, three that have 3 goals. Julian Quinones of Mexico, Then, of course, the likes of Jonathan David also fall in that pack in terms of goal squad. But he's been really, really good, or he's looked good. Raul Jimenez, he may have run down his contract. And last I checked, Wolverhampton Wanderers were looking to sign him. I don't know, I don't remember exactly whether that deal was sealed, but it was in the pipeline or in the works. But he's been impressive. He's been quite impressive. In as far as this World Cup is concerned. Then, so he did score in the 22nd minute to, give Mexico the lead. And then in the 31st minute, Raul Jimenez was also on target. Ecuador had a couple of missed chances with the Mexican goalkeeper in an instance making a save, a fingertip save that sent the ball to kiss the outside of the upright. On another occasion or two, he was tested, but at the end of the day, sometimes good is not good enough. Gonzalo Plata and Ena Valencia did not manage to fulfill the dreams of the Ecuadorians there. Real Time says all African teams are going out. Whether they all go out, I think will matter. But they will still nonetheless be proud of what they've managed to achieve thus far. And for me, with all African teams going out, and maybe let me discuss that in a bit. Let me first conclude on this, because my thoughts may be a bit contrary to what other people's overall opinions could be about African teams. Anyways, so of course, Moises Caicedo, Vite in that sort of zone of the midfield, we're not good enough for the night. We're not good enough for the night. And you must give credit to this Mexican side that they do not concede. And it's something that I talked about, that my worry for Ecuador was that how do they break that compactness of the Mexicans? They can't sit in a mid-block and sort of frustrate teams. sort of frustrate teams because Quinones did not just score, he also provided an assist, for Raul Jimenez's goal. So he's been one of the standout performers of the tournament for me. And his name comes in addition to those that I've previously mentioned, the likes of Mbokazi, the likes of Johan Manzambi with the Switzerland team, among the players that have looked really, really impressive thus far in this competition. So let's wait and see where the road leads for Mexico. I think Mexico are bound to take on whoever comes through between England and the Democratic Republic of Congo in as far as the round of 16 is concerned. In terms of the round of 16, we already have some confirmed fixtures, such as Canada are up against Morocco. We'll get to speak to that at the right time. Paraguay will take on France. So that's another hot cake. Brazil booked a date with Norway, and now we have to wait and see who Mexico will take on between England and Democratic Republic of Congo. So the round of 16 is equally beginning to shape up quite slowly by slowly, and we'll wait to see when that time comes. Okay, so that's Mexico for you. They continue to be impressive. I remember having a conversation with somebody, I don't remember who exactly, and they wanted to sell me on the idea of how Mexico could probably win this competition. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, it's never happened. They've hosted the tournament now 3 times. It's never happened for them. Could this be the time that it does happen for them? Maybe. You can never rule out anything. You can never rule out anything when it comes to football, And we're talking about Julian Quinones, who plays for Al Qadash in the Saudi Pro League. I've had people trying to water down the quality of the Saudi Pro League, and players have come out of the Saudi Pro League and still performed at their respective national teams to the best and greatest of standards. The likes of Riyad Mahrez, you've had Cristiano Ronaldo. Of course, he's not having the best World Cup because twice he's failed to score in a game. But nonetheless, you have the likes of Ruben Neves from Al Hilal. He's quite worth the salt. Joao Felix had an impressive game when they were up against Uzbekistan. So give and take. It's a difference of opinion. In this world where we are allowed to have differences of opinion, I do appreciate people's thoughts, understanding that mine are not more superior to theirs, but sometimes we share opinions and you're thinking, convince me more if you want to sell me to that idea. So Mexico maybe slowly climbing up the ladder of this tournament. And if they continue on that trajectory, they'll continue to be a hard nut to crack because they find a way to score. They may not score so many goals, but the fact that they do not concede is quite impressive. It's quite impressive. So let's wait and see. Anyways, moving on to other games that were played, because yesterday there were 3 games, or yesterday leading into today morning, there were other games that were played at the World Cup. Who do we start with? Okay, before we get to the other games, let's talk about the performance of African teams. User is asking me what I think about Senegal, Belgium. We'll get to that in a bit. But real-time intel says all African teams are going home. Now, this is what I wanted to say about African teams. Whether they all go home now or until otherwise, of course, Morocco has already advanced to the round of 16, and they're going to come up against Canada. For me, there are still plenty of positives to take out of their performance at the World Cup. You may see all African teams, almost all African teams packing. But as I watched some of these games, I was appreciating the facts or the idea, the school of thought. And maybe, I don't know if it's just mine or there are others that share a similar school of thought, that I feel that the gap is continuously closing. And it's something that I hinted on yesterday, in yesterday morning's podcast, that you could make the argument on 2 sides. It's either their opponents in European giants and other footballing giants from elsewhere have downgraded so much in quality that it feels like African teams are closing constantly, closing the gap because we use fiber. A technician went to fix a client's fiber and ended up messing up with mine. It's something very concerning. I don't know if it's something that my ISP can even attend to. I don't know. I don't know. But it's something quite disturbing for my case. And I can only hope that the situation gets resolved at the earliest opportunity or at the earliest time of asking. Um, it's really frustrating. But we'll see. We'll continue for now. Now, majority of you have dropped off, but let's hope you can gather yourselves back in a bit. But as you look to gather yourselves back, I was um I was driving my point home about African teams. I was saying you could argue of two ways. You could make the case or the argument in two ways that their opponents have fallen off or have had a drop in quality, that it feels that the African teams have, are moved closer to them or closed the gap. Not entirely, but are continuously closing the gap. However, I'd want to think of it in this particular way. Africa, quality wise, and how they go about their football is improving continuously. I'll give you an example. I was watching that game between Cote d'Ivoire and Norway, and how the level of confidence Ivory Coast had building that ball from out of the back. And I said, that's really impressive. In years gone by, we're accustomed to our teams booting the ball forward and then the midfielders, forwards, struggling for it. Maybe the striker wins the header, somebody wins the rebound, and etc., etc. And then they carry on. Yesterday, you were watching the team build that ball from out of the back and taking it to Norway as often as they could, beating lines of the counter press and playing it through all. So for me, I see African teams constantly closing the gap on the difference in quality between themselves and European teams and other big footballing nations. But also, in some cases, you have a drop in quality for these European countries. For example, to the extent of German, we can speak about German, and their quality that they displayed at the World Cup was really wanting. So there's also that case scenario. So that's why I said it can be both ways, or it can be the argument can be sliced in different ways, and you could still have a case to make. Okay, Ash says France is scary too. We'll get to discuss France because they were part of the teams that played yesterday. But for now, so real time. Those are my thoughts about African teams. Yeah, it is painful to see them go home, but for me, I'm proud of them nonetheless. Forget Tunisia, who I don't want to say embarrassed us, but did not come good on their expectations. You could argue they were up against really tough opponents, but I thought they could have done better. Anyways, guys, continue to take part in that poll question on who you think will come out on top between England and DRC Congo. Okay. Who do you think will win between Senegal and Belgium? I think Senegal will win, and I hope Senegal does win, because Belgium is one of those European teams that I think have dropped in quality. But we'll discuss that game at the right opportunity. Okay. This France squad is incredible. That's from Jalin. So let's talk about, should we talk about France first or Ivory Coast? Two of you have mentioned France now. I'm compelled to start with France. England will beat Congo. It won't be an easy match, but I believe England will edge it. Go ahead and give me your prediction, Ash. Go ahead and give me your prediction as well, beyond just taking part in the poll. Guys, when you take part in that poll question, you can go ahead and also give me your prediction and say maybe England will win it 2-1, 3-1, or DRC Congo will come out on top. And let's see what happens. Remember, there are no draws. At the end of the day, whether normal time, extra time, penalties, we must have a winner. We must have a winner at the end of it all. So let's tackle the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is France. You're predicting England to win by 2-1. And then Asha says, I'm disappointed with Ivory Coast exit. They were the dark horses for me. Okay, we'll discuss Ivory Coast in a bit. Let's start with France-Sweden. Now, this felt as one of the most one-sided games that I've seen in this World Cup. And until very late on in the game, that Sweden managed to get themselves 2 extra attempts on target. For majority of the game, they had only 1 attempt on target, which spoke to their overall performance. They're not getting in the final third. Later on, finding solutions in terms of breaking the French defense. They struggled to get their forwards on the ball as much as possible. When it came to Victor Gyökeres, Alexander Isak, Anthony Elanga, they really, really struggled. In the middle of the park, you felt that the likes of Yassine Ayari was sort of quite busy, was being busy, you know. And yet, at the business end of the game, they're not able to get the job done. In the end, it felt like a one-sided sort of game. France were quite dominant, dominant in every aspect. When it came to possession, edging it to the tune of 63% compared to 37% over Sweden, having a whopping about 18 attempts on goal with 10 of those on targets, compared to Sweden's about 3 shots on targets. Some sources have cited 1, but I remember an attempt from Victor Gyökeres that was, kept out by McMahon. There's another shot at the tail end of the game. So their XG coming at a mere 0.33 compared to France's 2.55. Now, France should have scored more. I felt that they squandered some opportunities. But Wendell, is it Wendell? I think he's called Wendell, the Sweden goalkeeper. I think he's called Wendell. No. Yes, he's called Wendell. He had an impressive game. He had a good game. And this is what I often say. It's oftentimes challenging to find a player you give flowers to when their team lose, and when they lose by the kind of margin that Sweden lost with. And yet I felt that Wendell did something to keep Sweden in the contest as much as he possibly could, including a French side who hit the uprights on 2 occasions through Kylian Mbappe and Michael Olise. And this was before they found the back of the net through Kylian Mbappe himself, the captain. There's something I like about Kylian Mbappe. Oftentimes, he tries not to complicate things. As soon as he's given that ball and he has the goal at his side, he's going to find the space and take the shot. He does not look to be intricate, to be skillful on the ball, if you know what I mean. He's not looking to dribble past defenders and, make the news. He's all about put that ball in the back of the net. He's all about business, That's my sentiment about Kylian Mbappe, So he's such an impressive player. I don't know what you guys think. While Kylian Mbappe was being really, really impressive, on the other side, as really, really relishing Michael Olise. Olise, what a player. What a player. Which brings me to my question this morning, guys. And I'm going to read your comments bit by bit. So indulge me if you think I'm taking long to read your comments. But Mike Olise versus Lamine Yamal. Now, Dear Barcelona fans, like Ash FCB, think for a second on its merits, not on your allegiances as an individual. In regards to Lamine Yamal being a Barcelona player, Michael Olise versus Lamine Yamal. What's your take on that debate or on that discussion? You're allowed to make your submission without necessarily committing yourself to choosing one or the other. But if you feel the need to, hesitate not and give me your thoughts down in the comment section. I'll be reading them all because I thought Michael Olise was really, really impressive in that game. He was all over the place. In that number 10 role that he occupies, he's all over the pitch. You can actually feel that the shackles have been taken off. Contrary to when he's played on the wing, he has the time and room to roam around the entire pitch, pick the ball from deep, drift off to the wide areas. In a game where Ousmane Dembele was really, really quiet, other than the attempt that he put wide in the first half, and it came off a rebound, I struggle to remember many moments or any other moments of Ousmane Dembele. So in a game where Ousmane Dembele felt quiet, really Bradley Bacola was there showcasing the Arsenal scouts that I'm worth the salt. I thought Michael Olise was the better performer on the night. Kylian Mbappe may have scored a brace and got himself the man of the match accolade, but I thought it was Michael Olise who deserved it. Which then brings me to the question: who do you think is better for you? Is it Lamine Yamal? Is it Michael Olise? So. All right, let me run through some of your comments because they've come in plenty since then. Okay, I'll digress a bit back to say somebody said France are scary, too scary. And what makes them really scary is that attack. When you look at the attacking force, even when they withdraw players, they're still bringing on a Desiree Doué, a Jean-Philippe Mateta, a Ryan Chaki. And that's, I think, what scares the opponents the most, So, and then, of course, he made substitutions with the fullbacks, bringing on Malo Gusto and Theo Hernandez, for Lucas Digne and Jules Koundé, who had started in that game. So that French squad is incredible. And yet, I feel it has its weak points, especially in that midfield, where Adrien Rabiot also had an impressive game, Okay. I'm disappointed with Ivory Coast. We'll talk about Ivory Coast. Ash predicted 2-1 in favor of England. User is predicting a 4-1 victory for England over DRC Congo. Ash says France are going to the semi-final. Hopefully so. Their next opponent is going to be Paraguay. Let's see how they fare against Paraguay. I think Hurricane deserves a World Cup semi-final at least. Okay, that's he has to work for it as much as his teammates have to work for it to help him get there. Then you say best striker of the world at the moment. Who do you mean best striker of the world at the moment? Do you mean Kylian Mbappe or do you mean Hurricane? Kindly indulge me on that one or clarify a little more. England are gonna lose against Mexico because, like I said, whoever advances between DRC Congo and England is set to meet Mexico. So that's Asha. Sorry. The reason as why I do not pronounce your name as Asha and I instead call it User is because there's no H. So User says England are going to lose against Mexico. Well, time will tell. Time will tell. Ash says France versus Paraguay. Paraguay will sit on a low block. Mbappe struggles against low block teams, but this France team has too many individual talents. Anyone can make a difference. I think that's true. Yesterday, Ousmane Dembele may have been quiet, but he may come against Paraguay and he's the difference maker. So, and then Jalin says Portugal versus Croatia. What do you think? Who do you think will take it? Now, that's a bit of a difficult one and a close call. And I wish for Portugal to do well. I wish for Portugal to do well. I do. I like Croatia. I have no problems about them. I would wish well Luka Modric. And I remember a Real Madrid fan yesterday interacting with us, and he was saying it's going to be tough choosing sides because they like Ronaldo, they like Luka Modric for all their contributions for Real Madrid. And I said, may the best team win. So Portugal need to come out and be bold. Otherwise, Croatia will take no strangers, will take no prisoners with them. But I think Portugal will come out on top. That's my feeling. Then SSB says, hello SSB. I think Croatia wins. That's a Jalil. Okay, interesting take. I think we are differing on that, but like I often say, anything can happen. Mbappe, to me, is maybe the best World Cup player since Maradona. Okay. Yesterday, again, we were having a conversation, or I put the same question to our viewers. And I remember the time, was it yesterday or the other night? I remember one of them was Fikma, and among others. And I was putting to them the question, is Kylian Mbappe the best World Cup player ever? Because when you look at him in the context of the World Cup alone, 18 games played and 18 goals scored, he's on level with Lionel Messi, who I believe has played at more World Cup games. But more importantly, in this campaign already, he has a tally of 6 goals, just as many as Lionel Messi. So you go back to the previous edition of the World Cup, and he scored 8 goals. This one, he has already scored 6. That means that's what, about 14 goals? He scored 4 goals in his debut World Cup. That's 2018, when they were winning it. So he's that good a player. He's that good a player. In regards to the question of who is better between Lamine Yamal and Michael Olise, user says Olise is clear, while SSB says Lamine Yamal is better. User says Yamal is overrated. I don't think he's overrated, but that's just my opinion. User, you say France have easy route till the semifinals. No disrespect to Paraguay and Morocco. If you think, by the way, I don't believe there is such a thing as an easy route. And the reason as to why I feel that way or think that way is, is this belief and conviction that I have about the surprises of football. That even an underdog can come up and upset the balance of scale. When you look at the overall quality and display, of course, on paper, some games look easy. But I want to use some examples from this very World Cup. When you look back to Portugal versus DRC Congo, that 1-1 draw. When you look back to Spain versus Cape Verde, that goalless draw. It's what tells me, or what brings me to the point of anything can happen. Because in a knockout competition or stage of a competition like this, it may not take much. We have a saying in our local language that where a hero dies, there's no battle. In other words, heroes get killed by the slightest of things. In Uganda, we had the former, I don't know whether he was at the level of brigadier general or whatever. I think he was Major General at the time, James Kazini. He was allegedly killed or murdered by his concubine, Draru. And the story was he was hit by an iron bar. Now, you can imagine a guy who had been at the war front in different wars, including in Kisangani in Congo, and he gets killed by a nobody. Literally, a civilian, you know? So, that's that. Then, fast forward, you think of others, like the former CDF, the way he passed on, quietly. So, the point I'm trying to make is that there are these giants. And in these giants, or with these giants, these are teams that you expect to beat up against the small boys. And sometimes our expectation is that they will win quite convincingly. But does it manifest as such? You know, oftentimes, thus far, it's not been the case. The margins have been quite small. The other example I can give you, and whereas South Korea are not that big a footballing giant, but the way they were stunned by South Africa is that very few people expected that to happen. So anything can happen. Anything can happen. You may look at France as having an easy route, and maybe it is to a certain extent, but maybe their elimination or exit could also come as a huge surprise against the most unlikely candidate. So we'll have to wait and see. NSH. Oh, NSH. Okay. Almost read that one for NHS, which is the National Healthy Services, I think in the UK. You said hi. You say, come on, England. You say, okay, that's NSH. Hi, NSH. Good to have you on the broadcast. I hope you've taken part in that poll question. Then who will you support if Brazil gets knocked out? That's from user. I don't know who I'll support. That's the honest bit. I don't know who I'll support because I do not know what teams will be left then. I'll make that decision at the time when we get there. Then you have Bole saying happy birthday. Bole, thanks for that. Okay, moving on. Or let's wrap up on France versus Sweden. Like I said, it all felt a one-way contest. One that the French deservedly won. Kylian Mbappe with the brace in the 45th minute. That was at the tail end of the first stanza, and then Bradley Barcola with an impressive goal in the second half, and then Kylian Mbappe. So there were other missed opportunities from the likes of Michael Olise, from the likes of, was it Desiree Doué at the tail end of that? Then there was an opportunity for Jean-Philippe Mateta with Desiree Doué laying in that cross. So there's that. So anyways, that was impressive in its own ways. And France marched on to face Paraguay at the round of 16. In the other game, we had Cote d'Ivoire versus Norway. And somebody was saying earlier on that they were disappointed that Cote d'Ivoire got eliminated because they were one of the dark horses for them in the tournament. So that's true, you know. I think a lot of us had this expectation that Cote d'Ivoire will do well. And I remember saying, instead of Senegal, we could see Cote d'Ivoire do well. Instead of Senegal doing well, we could see Cote d'Ivoire do well. And unfortunately, they could not go beyond. They could not go beyond Norway. It's a bit unfortunate. But I will also make the argument that Norway merited themselves advancing to the round of 16. User, you're asking my thoughts on Matthias Fernandes joining Spurs. We'll get to that in a bit when we get to the transfer segment of the conversation. So, Ivory Coast. Again, it's the kind of game that I watched, and I did not see a huge gap in terms of the overall contest, in terms of difference in quality. And that was my argument earlier on, to say it feels like African teams are closing the gap, that their football is gradually improving, whereas the production machine of talent may not be as good as it was years gone by. The overall structure of organizing the game, of course, benchmarking on the very best that there is out there, you can't help it but notice that something is improving with these African teams, you know. And it's there for the world to see. So let's go through the numbers before I wrap up on my overall impression of the game. You had good morning, Mitchell Wine Scots. How are you doing, my brother? What did you make? It's a quick fire for you as soon as you arrive. But what did you make of Ivory Coast versus Norway? So, no, Ivory Coast had an XG of 1.49. For those of you that believe in that statistic of XG, Norway had 1.90. 5 shots on target for Ivory Coast, 4 shots on target for Norway. 9 shots off target for Ivory Coast and 4 off target for Norway. The blocked shots were 0 for Ivory Coast and 3 for Norway. Possession, Norway edged it to the tune of 53% compared to 47% of Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast had 14 corner kicks compared to Norway's only 3. So it's a game, it was a close contest, a game of small margins. And for me, it boiled down to the lapse in concentration and the failure to do that extra, that little bit extra, when you look at the 2 goals that they conceded. Obviously, the goal scored by Antonio Nusa was impressive, was really, really impressive. But, and this was at the tail end of the opening stanza, you know. I think it was around the 39th minute, that goal by Antonio Nusa is really, really good, you know, really, really good goal. He does play for RB Leipzig. So when you look at that goal and you watch how they recycle play prior to the goal being scored, I felt that in the moment when Antonio Nusa takes the shot, and the goal is impressive, but you cannot really apportion much blame on the goalkeeper. You know, you cannot apportion much blame on the Ivory Coast goalkeeper. And the reason as to why that's Fofana for you in goal. But I felt in the moment where Frank Kessie returns to try and close the space before that shot is taken, because it comes from a moment of recycled play. Initially, he's passed the ball and he passes it back to into the midfield. I don't know if it was Patrick Badge or Sander Badge in that sort of role, who then passes it to Martin Odegaard. Now, as the 2 midfielders exchange those 2 passes, Frank Kessie's attention is dragged, as should be, because he's one of the central midfielders, because you had Ibrahim Sangare, Frank Kessie, the other was Olahi or Ola something, Olai in that midfield. So his attention is deservedly taken away. But when the ball gets passed back by Martin Odegaard to Antonio Nusa, as he drives into the box, in front of him immediately being Nicolas Pepe, and behind him it was Aguela Due, was in there, who are supposed to try and close this gap. First of all, Nicolas Pepe is the first suspect. He does not close the space quickly enough. And maybe he does not want to overcommit himself, because sometimes if you commit yourself too early, you could be dribbled past, you know. Now, as you watch Nicolas Pepe stay in that space, then Frank Kessie is arriving back. And as Antonio Nusa drops to his shoulder to take the shot away, Frank Kessie is now back, and he sort of stretches his leg out as Nusa takes off that shot. But I'm imagining, you see, what I call to be that extra little bit of mile that you go is you throwing your entire body in the path or in the way, which I said, Okuiwa Mobili. I don't know how I would coin the phrase in English for you guys, but I felt that's what Frank Kessie would have done. I imagine if it was, I remember watching, it was, I think, Portugal versus Uruguay at the 2018 World Cup. I remember watching Lucas Torreira dive into the path of an attempted shot. I don't remember if it was by Cristiano Ronaldo, and he put his head in the pathway. In other words, that's leaving no stone unturned. The other player that I remember was Phil Jones, featuring for Manchester United. at one point in defending, he somehow finds himself on the floor, and then he realizes his opponent is about to, take that shot off. And in attempting to take that shot off, he realizes he cannot get back to his feet to make the block. So he simply dragged his body across the floor and he put his head in the pathway, So I felt that in that sort of moment, maybe, just maybe, if Frank Kessie throws his body in the way, maybe we would not be having this sort of discussion that we're having, But sometimes these things are easier said than done. And it's upon the player in that sort of particular moment and the interpretation of the situation that leads them to make certain decisions. I know for a fact that game moments and interpretation may sound easy for us who are interpreting them in the aftermath than those that are living in the moment. And then the example I want to cite on that was the goal that Japan scored against Brazil. All those Brazil players that were following Sano almost were preoccupied with the idea that maybe he was going to pass that ball. And then he drives the ball, and before they know it, he's close to the D, and he's striking that ball beyond the reach of Arson Ramsey-Specker, and it's 1-0. So it could be that. Anyways, Nando says Ivory Coast were just unlucky. Probably agree with that one. Micho says Ivory Coast was so selfish up front. The coach made a mistake to start Diomande and Pepe, which I think one had to be off to start Diallo, because those who started on the wings, they are so playful. That's his interpretation of that. But Manchester United fans may tell you that Amadou Diallo can be just as playful. I missed your introduction today, Mr. Usual Suspects. Thanks for the show. That's my brother, Nando Global Sports. He has a YouTube channel, so if you can spare a moment after this broadcast, please check him out. You can subscribe if you are familiar with domestic language. Micho says, talk about Odegaard as a 10. If Norway were to be knocked out, I wouldn't pin him for his incompetence. We're going to talk about Norway, but I wanted to first start with those goals that Ivory Coast conceded, because in a way they felt a bit avoidable. And even when you go to the second goal, I still felt that the moment when Oscar Bob plays that impressive pass into Patrick Badge, and Patrick Badge steals the attention of three defenders. Now, Nando here is a goalkeeper. He can tell us, because this was my argument, that for any team, when you're playing and for the defenders, the moment you know that you have a fox in the box, that you have that target man of a striker in the opponents, at any one point, there must be a center back that is tracking the movements of that central striker. It could be your, traditionally we have the number 4 and the number 5. So you have to look at it in the sense of, if you and I are the defender and we have a striker against us, that at any one point, at least one of us has to have their attention on that striker. And yet I felt in the moment when Ivory Coast conceded the second goal, they dropped the ball. And this is why I said, for me, it was due to lapses in concentration, because they get so attracted to where the ball is with Patrick Badge. And then before they know it, he's successfully made a cutback. And, Brad Erling Haaland had no marker to him at the moment when they conceded that goal. So, first of all, it was a really, really impressive line-breaking pass from Oscar Bob. He plays it in between two defenders, and they were there for the checking. And then when you realize, again, Frank Kessie, who is arriving back, realizes a little too late that Brad Erling Haaland is not, occupied. Now, initially, I wanted to apportion a certain level of blame on him. But then I realized, whose primary role is it to keep the eyes on Brad Erling Haaland? And it must have been one of those centre backs, Kosonou and Agbado. One of them had to, have their attention on him. So I felt that was a lapse in concentration, and that's where they were punished. So the second goal comes, and Brad Erling Haaland almost gasped for his breath because the touch, he does not get as fine a touch as he had hoped to have. in a way, he watches Fofana almost crawling towards the ball and thinking, oh, he's going to keep this one out. And it would have been an embarrassing moment for him. But anyways, that's the goal that decided the game. But on the part of Ivory Coast, I mean, Amadou Onana had Amadou Diallo had an impressive cameo. He scores the goal that gives Ivory Coast the equalizer, and they had hope in that game. After that equalizer came, of course, I thought Bonny struggled as a striker. I was very critical of Yan Diomande. For me, I'm saying he's not good as advertised. I've seen him in matches where he's been impressive. Versus Ecuador, he was impressive. I had the opportunity to watch him against Borussia Dortmund last season. He was impressive. But in 4 games that Ivory Coast played at the World Cup, only he turned up in 1 game. Now, even that game against Germany, I thought for me, he was still lacking. Yes, he's still young. He has a long way to go. But with all the hype and praise that has come around his name, my expectations of him were quite high. And maybe I'm the wrong one to have such high expectations of him. But it came out of the praise that, it was born out of the praise that was being, pelted in his direction. So, but I feel, and then when you look at the price tag that is being, slapped on his name, in as far as the transfer window is concerned, he's not as impressive as advertised. It's not to say he will not go to have to be an impressive player. That's a whole different, story. But in as far as the tournament is concerned, because it does not accommodate you so many games to be impressive. You're as good as your last game. That's why if a player comes in and is not doing good, we're saying, no, that one shouldn't come back. And if a player comes on and he has a good cameo, we're saying he should start the next game. Because we know there's not much time or plenty of time for us to, to be saying, give him more time and let's see what they can deliver. Okay. But Amadou Diallo's goal was really, really impressive. And that interplay between him and Nicolas Pepe, there's something impressive about left-footed players. That slight touch of a pass from Nicolas Pepe into the path of Amadou Diallo is what makes we football addicts to think that maybe you yourself can, go tomorrow to Owino and buy your boots and put them on and hit the turf and be as impressive. But it takes perhaps many, many years of practice. But that goal looked impressive. And then when you look at the free kick that he attempted at the tail end of the game, was really, really impressive as well. That's Amadou Diallo. So he had a good cameo. Let me read some of your comments before we revert the whole role to Norway and how they looked at the end of the day. Okay. Okay, I think I read that comment. Mitchell says, talk about Odegaard. I'll talk about Odegaard in a bit. Asha says, Gabriel will take revenge on Haaland. Speaking of that, that's going to be one physical battle. Remember the rivalry that there is between Manchester City and Arsenal and the physical battles that happened in that 2-1 victory between Man City and Arsenal at the Etihad Stadium that had preceded the battle at the Carabao Cup final at Wembley. So there's going to be a battle between Erling Haaland and Gabriel Magalhaes when Brazil take on Sweden. Okay, Mitchell says, you're right, 3 defenders focused on the ball, leaving Haaland alone to score. That was so bad. Okay, what's up on the moon that we signed Fernandes? Really? Now, Ash was here the other day telling me that Matthias Fernandes is not worth the money and that he would rather they go for a different target. And yet now that the deal has been confirmed to be sealed, anyways, that's football fans for us. But congratulations to you, Ash, upon the acquisition of Matthias Fernandes. Okay. Diomande seems to be a brother to Dr. Kwefrukuta, as Mitchell Wainscots. In other words, what Mitchell Wainscots is trying to say is he looks too busy, but then the final product wasn't as good. I can't wait to see Kudus combined with Fernandes. Okay, Mohamed Kudus unfortunately had he spent the better part of the season injured at Tottenham Hotspur, as were other players. Well, Fernandes would be Declan Rice. Let's hope so. I'm deluded now. Fernandes really rejected United and Arsenal to join relegation battle Spurs. Nah, it's not that he rejected those sides. That's not true. Tottenham Hotspurs made the best offer, and for him, Matthias Fernandes, he said, whoever comes with the best offer is the one I'll sign for. It was never about, I prefer this club over the other. Manchester United were committed to signing the player, but they were not committed to paying the resources or making the financial outlay that Tottenham Hotspurs have put on the table, which is a guaranteed £85 million. Arsenal had the player on their shortlist, but they never made an actual attempt to try and sign him. But that's not to say that Spurs have not been impressive in acquiring his services. So you say money talks. I have changed my mind. Norway, Brazil. I'm for Brazil. Okay, that's from the Gamer 101. Quest. The Gamer Savinho. Next. Okay, let's hope that will be the case. Anyways, guys, continue to partake in that poll question for this morning. I can see 16 votes cast, and 69% of you think that England will win, while 31% of you think that DRC Congo will go through. Now, let's conclude on the Ivory Coast game to assessing Norway's performance. First of all, Norway, I thought they were good. Or they did just what was enough to get through this game. Now, I've advocated for Arsenal to use Martin Odegaard as a number 8, play a single pivot, play him as a number 8, and then find somebody to play in the 10. But while I say that, with the Norwegian team, he's still deployed in the same manner. That you have a Patrick Berg who plays for Bodo Glimt. Those of you that watched their exploits in the UEFA Champions League last campaign, when they beat the likes of Man City, Atletico de Madrid, home and away against Inter Milan, and in the first leg against Sporting Lisbon, may have noticed him. He plays alongside Fulham's Sander Berge in that sort of central midfield area, and then ahead of them is Martin Odegaard, the captain. And his role is to link the defensive midfield and the attack. But in similar fashion, he does drop a little too deep, the way he does at Arsenal. And it reminded me of the criticism that he's always faced to that extent, and I've been one of those that criticize him about that oftentimes he drops so deep that when it comes to meeting him in areas or zones where he should be impacting the game a little more, he's sometimes absent. It's similar criticism that we've had of Gabriel Jesus as a forward, And Mikel Arteta, jumped to his defense to say that's naturally his game, that there's nothing he can do to change that about him. So similarly, I saw him operate in a similar manner for Norway. Now, however, with Norway, I don't know whether it's because Norway are not innately conservative. They've not played. That's to say they've not played the way Arsenal played their last two campaigns, where they've looked to be a bit more cautious, a bit more conservative, and things like that. So that's about it. Then, in terms of impacting play, he's still as creative. I've never thought that he has lost his element of creativity. I just think his overall application in the game has to be bettered. The reason as to why players like Bruno Fernandes are better than him creatively is because they do not drag themselves too deep in the overall context of the game. While he has 3 assists, again, for a player of his caliber, I'd want to assume he would have had more if he stayed within that zone and let Patrick Berge and Sander Berge do their, role of, be the link between the attacking midfield and the defensive part of the pitch. So for me, that criticism will still stay because I believe he can give us more than he's already giving us. But the reason as to why he's not giving us that more is his overall character and the way he goes about his game. That he drifts so deep sometimes, you know. We're talking about a Norway side that have used Alexander Soloth on the wing. Now, the way he operates in the wide areas is not that impressive because he's not naturally a winger, he's a central forward. Now, imagine if Norway had somebody like a Desli Due, somebody like a Dembele, somebody like a Bradley Bakola, a very, very decent winger. And that he would operate with that person. Again, I think it would improve on his effectiveness. But I think he's been impressive nonetheless, and he's led his team quite well. I was really, really impressed with his performance. But more importantly, Patrick Badge. Because in that moment when they scored the second goal, he's the guy running out of midfield and occupying the wider area of the pitch. And how that came about was because what's his name? Oscar Bob had drifted, wide. Tony Kuhn. Oh, thank you so much for the cup of coffee. Much appreciated. That's Tayon Khan. Is it Khan or Kun? You say I'm Japanese. We lost to Brazil, but the players gave it their all. Which country do you think will win? I think Brazil will win. But like I've said multiple times, that's more wishful than it is objective because I'm a Brazil fan. But thank you so much for the cup of coffee, Khan. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. So, Paul Muntu says this. So, guys, that's what I talk about when I say the super chat. What Khan has done. Thank you so much for the cup of coffee. So, when you watch that second goal, that Norway score, so you have Oscar Bob occupying the wider area, and that created a space in that zone, So, and you had two players run into that space, You had one dragging the attention of the fullback to the wide part of the pitch, and then you had Patrick Badge run into that half space, what ordinarily would be between the centre back and his fullback. So that's the space he occupied, and that's where he got to drag or to steal the attention of all the defenders. So it was really, really impressive. So those two were impressive. Okay. Okay. Nando says Brazil. Okay. Which football creators you follow? Which football creators do I follow? It will be hard to remember all of them on my fingertips. But when it comes to content consumption, as a creator, I consume as much content as possible without necessarily having to follow a particular individual in a way. And it's not to say I do not follow individuals, but it's to say I live in a space where there are many creators, and on a different day, I may be consuming content from a different person, from a different stranger, depending on what they are delivering. But there's one called Football Made Simple. There's one called Football Made Simple, I think. That one comes to mind. These days, I no longer follow him as much, but Statman Dave, I think that's his name. It's one of those. So it depends on what I'm looking for sometimes. If I'm looking for more tactical, technical insights of the game, there's also the Sun Sport. The Sun Sport has a gentleman, I'm forgetting his name. I've forgotten his name, but the Sun Sport as well. So those are some of those that that come to mind that I can remember. Okay, do you know Expressions? I've seen him. I've seen his clips, particularly from DR Sports and on X. He's very lyrical on the way he goes about his delivery of content. He's really, really cool. He likes to Jesus Christ. When I oftentimes enjoy watching his clips when Spurs have lost the game. But anyways, that's in that game, guys, I was really, really impressed by Koeman, the Ivory Coast left back, Koeman. I thought he had a good game. I hope you guys took note. I thought he had a good game. The way he came forward, yes, the execution may have not been perfect, but I felt there was a brilliant player in Koeman there. Okay, let me digress a bit back for some of the comments that I skipped. Okay, is Alex Scott not for sale? Yes, that's according to AFC Bournemouth. They do not want to sell Alex Scott amidst a strong interest from the likes of Arsenal, Manchester United. They've all made inquiries about the availability of the player. Nando said, of course, Brazil is taking this year the trophy, so it's the end of the road for Norway. Like I said, for me, it's more wishful than it is objective because I do root for Brazil. And I've said that Brazil's strongest key in all this is Carlo Ancelotti than it is with the the exceptional talent that could lay within that team. User said, we should sign Bruno Guimaraes and the Moroccan wonder kid in central midfield. I don't know, Asha, if you're an Arsenal fan, user, Jesus Christ. Forgive me if I keep interchanging between Asha and user. Sometimes my mind preoccupies me with the name Asha. But user, you say you should sign Bruno Guimaraes. Bruno Guimaraes, impressive. 28 coming on to 29 will be an impressive signing. However, Newcastle are hell-bent on saying they do not want to lose two central midfielders or two of their star players in the same transfer window. And it's an understandable sort of case to make. But you can also understand where these players stand. If all the good players are exiting the project, what compels you to stay around? So we'll have to wait and see. Then when you talk about the Moroccan wonder kid, I think you're making reference to Ayubu Bouadi at Lille, who apparently Lille are willing to demand in the excess of £65 million for his signature. A couple of clubs have joined his radar. Chelsea have inquired about him. Arsenal in there, Liverpool are in there, PSG are in there. We'll have to wait and see. But there's also that other single player, Neil L. something, Anoy, the one from AC Roma. He's also equally impressive. I don't know if teams have had the opportunity to take a look at him. He plays in that midfield alongside Bouadi. He's equally impressive, if not even better. So maybe you can also think about him. Then does £85 million equal to €100 million? Relatively thereabouts, because the pound value is a little higher than that of the euros, but it's relative. What do club managers do during the World Cup? Remember, oftentimes the World Cup comes post-season and it's during the summer, apart from the 2022 edition of the World Cup, where it came midway the season. So ordinarily, during this period, club managers are on holiday, are on vacation. Their season is done, they're on vacation. And depending on what manager it is you're talking about, they will go away for a couple of weeks, enjoy time with their family, enjoy their vacations, and spend some of the money that they've hardly earned through the course of the season. Then, as time goes on, they sit down with their teams and start to plan for the subsequent season and reflect on the season that is finished, have a sort of review where they need to improve, the things they need to do better, the things they need to cut out, and that sort of thing. I'll give you an example. If you're Roberto Di Zerbi, you may not have too much time away. Why? Because you had just part ways with Olympique Marseille. You're fresh in the job for Tottenham Hotspurs, so you may only be away for 2 weeks and then come back to concentrate on this Tottenham Hotspur project that has sort of been poor in the last 2 campaigns, and you're planning. But then they're also watching football. They're also watching football to scout out more players. Ordinarily, at football clubs, you have a hierarchy when it comes to player recruitment. maybe you have a technical director, a sporting director, a head of football. So a manager will say, I'm looking for a central midfielder and I'm looking for a number 6 or a number 8. So the sporting director with his scouting team and maybe head of recruitment, etc., start to scan around and look for options. Now, the manager or head coach's contribution is also to say, I've looked at players A, B, C, D, maybe take an extra look at them, because you also have an entire data team, which looks at data, statistical data, in the sense of how many games or minutes they played over the last 2 to 3 years. Have they had any injuries? Have they had what? What's their sprint rate? How many times do they touch the ball? So all the statistics that matter. So basically, they are preoccupied with that sort of work, and they are in touch with the recruitment departments to say, yes, based on the position you want to strengthen, these are the top 5 candidates that we have. And then the head coach may say, or the manager will say, I prefer this over the other. And then that may determine the sort of hierarchy in terms of priority of list. So if you're searching for a midfielder and you're Manchester United, you could say, Matthias Fernandez is number 1 on our list. But if we do not get him, we should get a Sandro Tonali. If we do not get him, we should get Tchouameni. If we do not get him, we should get a Bruno Guimaraes. If we do not get him, maybe we should look to, let's say, get maybe a Lucien Aguema from Sevilla, or maybe let's get Emmanuel Locatelli from Juventus. So in that sort of thing. So oftentimes they are planning for their squads. They are analyzing the performances of some of the individual players to see how they can improve them. They are engaged with the recruitment team to say, we need to trade off these players. I do not think I'm going to be using them more next season, and all that sort of thing. So that's what preoccupies them. But a lot of them watch some football. I hope that answers your question. To be honest, I think Spurs should move on to sign wingers now rather than dropping 100 million on Tonali. Well, they are still interested in signing Sandro Tonali. Remember, they needed to replace Juvis Bissouma because that one is out of the way. Then Lucas Bergvall has requested to leave. That's the Sweden international. So they need to find a replacement there. And they feel, or Roberto Di Zerbi feels, that Pape Matsar may not be up to the task or up to the challenge, or may not be as good as Sandro Tonali. So for him, he has identified that they need to strengthen more in that role as a priority, as opposed to anything else. But remember, they've also already worked on the defense. Really, they still have Luka Vuskovic, who is a target for Brighton and Hove Albion, at the 19-year-old. They also have Marco Senesi, who's just coming, John Paul Van Hecke, just coming. They still have a Mickey Van de Ven, Christian Romero, who I think will leave the club, unless otherwise. Pedro Porro, Destin Udogi, Dejat Space. So they're thinking maybe the back line is covered. When it comes to the forward lines, they could be thinking Dominic Solanke, Richarlison are good enough. But you do have a Matthias still in there. You do have Xavi Simons, who is out through injury, so they know they're not going to have him for a good part of the season. So they are interested in Savinho. That we know for an absolute fact. So I think you could be right in your own assessment, but they also have their assessment of where they think that a conversation will lead. Mitchell said, Odegaard lied to me yesterday, like on 2 occasions. They had an attack having front 3 in front of him, but he failed to lay the ball to his forward to score. Such balls are so many served by Bruno, and that's what I was saying. Sometimes his decision making, that's why the likes of Bruno Fernandes are looking better than him in that role. I don't know what his interpretation is in that moment of the game. Like I said, I could be wrong, or he could be wrong in terms of the situational analysis of a particular moment. But I would want to believe I'm right and that is wrong. Why? Oftentimes, we've seen him, or we've watched him in a moment, and we're thinking to ourselves, that's an obvious pass to play. Why not playing it? And he complicates play as opposed to making it simple. And yet, Bruno Fernandes will make it simple. One of the other players that I remember when it came to making it simple was Francesco Sola Fabregas. Just put yourself in the right spot and he will find you. Same goes for a player like Andre Pirlo. It's never complicating the game, you know. So oftentimes he takes one too many touches on the ball that by the time he remembers to make the actual pass, that phase of play for the attacker has gone. You see, you oftentimes have a small window of opportunity for an attacker because they've watched the defender, they've made a run into a certain space, and they want that ball as soon as possible. You know, and for you, the attacking midfielder or the creative player, if you do not see that, now go and reflect yourself on how Michael Olise operated yesterday. If I'm Mikel Arteta, I'm telling Martin Odegaard, or I'm tasking Martin Odegaard to go and watch that game, how Michael Olise operated. Michael Olise is the kind of player that loves to have the ball on his feet because he knows he's good with that ball. He knows he's good with that ball on his feet. He can do things. He can dribble past players. He can create. But on a given number of occasions, he did not hold onto the ball too long. As soon as he identified a player in the right space, he made the pass. So, in a way, Martin Odegaard has something to improve, an element to improve about his game. And yeah, I'll be showing him videos of Cesc Fabregas, Bruno Fernandes, Michael Olise operating as a 10. Forget the Olise that operates as a winger. I'm talking about the Olise that operated as a 10 yesterday behind Kylian Mbappe. So thank you so much, Mitchell, for that observation. Okay, let me respond a little more to Kan's comments about losing to Japan and the players giving it their all. Now, I don't think, and maybe I do not watch Japan as often, but I never watch a game for Japan and come out thinking their performance was lackluster. When it comes to giving their all, putting their bodies on the line, leaving it all on the turf, that's what they are known for. That hard work, that discipline, that's what they are known for. Whether you lose to them, whether you draw against them, or whether you beat them, the one thing you will walk away thinking is that these guys are really, really disciplined. And they have the work ethic, that they are relentless, that they'll keep coming at you as often as you may think of it. Rick, the answer to your question is an absolute no. Gradao Game says no. What's that name? Is that Patat? Patata says RDC or DRC. I think you mean DRC, Congo. Okay. Let me see. Paul Montu, you said this. Okay, which football? Okay, I think I responded to that. User said, do you think anyone can falsely accuse of racism and send the guy off, similar which happened to Hinkapie? Now, twice we've experienced a player being sent off for covering their mouth while addressing an opponent player. Now, remember, this is a new rule, and it stemmed from the incident that involved Gianluca Prestiani and Vinicius Jr. in the UEFA Champions League, when Vinicius Jr. claimed that Gianluca Prestiani had racially abused him, calling him a monkey. So FIFA introduced this rule that you are not allowed to cover your mouth while in an exchange with an opponent. Now, I do not know, and I cannot with absolute certainty or doubt to say that Pierre Hincapie said something derogatory to his opponent. However, he did violate a rule. And if you see the player, when addressing the referee, he's not trying to say something horrible has been said to me, but it's more of, I'm reporting a rules violation in this particular case, because footballers want to gain any advantage or every advantage that they could have. It's the same thing that happened to Miguel Almiron because he was the first player to be given a red card for covering his mouth while addressing an opponent. Now, I excuse players when such things come, reason being, it's not easy to switch from to switch in an instant from what you've been accustomed to. So, for example, if you're used to eating your food using your right hand, if we ban you using your right hand and we say you're supposed to use your left hand, trust me, you will start using your left. But at one point, you're going to forget, or you're going to revert to what you're accustomed to or what is more natural to you, and you use your right, and then you'll catch yourself in the wrong and say, oh, I'm not supposed to use the right anymore. I'm supposed to use my left. So that's how I look at it, that these players were not trying to be racially abusive to their opponents, but in a moment, they forgot that the rules have now made it that you're not supposed to cover your mouth, but they are so accustomed to it. So it will take a bit of time for them to, to sort of adapt to it. Similar to what we had to experience when they introduced the rule about kicking the ball away, that it will cause you to get a a yellow card, or for delaying a restart. That's how I'd want to think about it. You skipped my comments. Oh, I went back and read the comments. That left back two missed a golden chance of scoring. That's what I said. The execution in the final third wasn't as good, but he looked good on the evening. Jesus Christ. I've responded to Rick. Rick responded to your question. Okay. Pattern, Republic, Democratic Congo, and Francis. Okay, I think you're more French. Please come back. Jesus Christ. Okay, those are some unworthy comments. Let's do this. So I'll just put Rick on a timeout until they sort themselves. Okay, let's go through some of your other comments. Okay, I think he was becoming a distraction for many of us. No, he is not banned. I've put him in a timeout for him to relax, so that he comes back with his senses. I mean, when somebody asks a question and you answer to it, to the contrary, then the subsequent insinuations are irrelevant. McKenna says, top tip, though, click on the third dots to the right in a comment and select block. By the way, it takes a lot for me to block somebody. Usually I refrain myself from getting too emotional about things to block out people. I want to give people a benefit of a chance or doubt. I don't remember who. I think it was KI. KI came here and he wanted to banter me. And for him, he was not being disrespectful. But he came to banter me and he ended up being a good follower. So even when people come with some really, really bad comments or negative comments, we've seen some derogatory comments, I want to give people the benefit of that maybe they can change their attitude before I block them. So I rather put you in a timeout for about 5 minutes, and if you can change your behavior, then we can proceed for the foreseeable future, unless I feel that you're never going to change. Okay, that's my point towards that rule. Okay, bro got banned. Robert, that Pepe Julien Onzima interview, is it a meme in Uganda? Yeah. That's a meme that keeps coming back every now and then, depending on where the society finds itself in terms of overall context of conversation and what is being discussed at hand. It's a meme that often comes back, but particularly that question from the journalist in Simon Kagwanjara, why are you gay? Anyways, it's an internet sensation in its own right. So, anyways, those were the games for yesterday. The action does continue today. England take on Democratic Republic of Congo at 7 p.m. East African time. Then Belgium will come up against Senegal at 11 p.m. That means two African nations are in action tonight. Then at 3 a.m., USA will be up against Bosnia Herzegovina. My hope is to watch all those three games if the situation permits. And then action will proceed the following day with Spain against Austria. Portugal will take on Croatia, and then Switzerland against Algeria. I do not know why the game between Switzerland and Algeria is set for 6 a.m. in the morning. Anyways, dear our calendar schedulers, you're killing us. You're killing us. I mean the people in comments, not you. It means you personally can't see them anymore. Okay. Anyways, so I'd love to discuss England and Congo. Okay, let's talk about England and Congo, about our expectations briefly before we, divert our attention to a bit of transfers. They can still chat. You just can't personally see it anymore. You can do it. Okay. So DRC against England. I think DRC Kong will come with the expectation that their day's opponent is better than them. And in having that expectation, it sets some realistic, perhaps a more realistic approach to the game. And the French gaffer in charge of the sons of Patrice Lumumba in Sebastien de Sabre is a man I root for really, really well. I always wish him well. And we're talking about a Congo side, a DRC Congo side that has some really good players in there, or players that have tried to step up. Yohan Wissa is one of those. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Noah Sadiki, what's his name? Arthur Masuaku. Cedric Bakambo needs to step up. He's not yet stepped up for me. He needs to step up. So I'm waiting to see him step up. But also my expectation is that Sebastien de Sabre could set up his team in such a conservative way, that does not permit too much room for England to express themselves. We know that England look to exploit spaces, particularly in the wing. So if it does dare go for a back five, I won't be surprised one bit, because he's going to look to close out those spaces in the wide areas and try and force them centrally, knowing that centrally they have some good players to provide cover. His approach varies depending on opponent. Their last game was against Uzbekistan. Obviously, Uzbekistan is a lesser opponent, so he went with the back four that included Chancel Mbemba, Axel Twanzebe in there. So we'll have to wait and see how they set up. But England have more questions to answer than we would ask of DRC Congo. You see, when you're at the helm of a team like England, there are certain expectations that naturally weigh on your shoulders, and Thomas Tuchel will be seeking to answer those questions. So in seeking to answer those questions, I've seen insinuations or suggestions that he goes for a single pivot in Declan Rice and then play him alongside, what's his name? I think they were suggesting Kobe Mino. Yes, the person was suggesting Kobe Mino. Now, a part of me seconds that motion, even though I do not think that is what is going to be done. I don't know if it's too difficult or it's even unthinkable, but I think a part of me would bench Declan Rice or Elliot Anderson, one of the two, and find room to accommodate Kobe Mine because I believe he's just fresher. He may give you more running legs. He's more forward thinking than these other two. So I'm thinking that. But really, I think that. I also know that sometimes these managers are hell bent on, operating with some certain players that they are more accustomed to. They have certain preferences within a squad. But because when you look at Declan Rice and Elliot Anderson, okay, they can both play as a 6, as an 8. But how about somebody that is more tailored naturally as an 8? That's where Kobe Mainu comes in for me. And I've been thinking about it because you're up against DRC Congo. My anticipation with this is that England are going to have majority of the ball. They're going to dominate possession. So why not try out players that are willing to express themselves more on the ball than those that are just going to do basic things? Because I believe Elliot Anderson and Declan Rice are going to do basic things. And yes, doing the best things is sometimes important. But then sometimes you need that player that is going to give you a slight variation. And I believe Kobe Mainu is one of those players. We've seen him do it at Manchester United. So I'd be really, really thinking about him. I could be wrong, but it's just my opinion. Because Mitchell says England should use more set pieces, otherwise they may fail to unlock the DRC defense. Now, if you're looking to rely on set pieces, in the absence of Rachel James, who suffered, I think, a hamstring injury, and knowing that because the other set piece taker are Bukayo Saka and Declan Rice, then that would mean that at least those two have to play. But let me first digress back to some of these comments. Okay, Guadal Game says Lucas Paqueta injured and probably missing the rest of the World Cup. He works in the midfield, and without him, there is an opportunity for Neymar to show up. He needs to step up because my challenge or reservation with Neymar is that you're selling yourself short on ground cover. When it comes to ground cover, I'm talking about having a weak link in a team when you're out of possession, because he's not going to give you a good counter press, no. And yet, the way Brazil have been operating is that Carlo Ancelotti has looked to reserve some of Vinicius Junior's energy when it comes to the counter press. He loves these other players to do the donkey work and then give the ball to give Vinicius Junior the ball to make things happen. It's not to say he does not help with the counter press, but you remember how Mo Salah was being used at Liverpool in that debut campaign for Arne Slot? So if you want Vinicius Junior to reserve a bit of energy, and then you also have a weak link in Neymar, it may sort of cause you problems. Then that calls for a change, that Vinicius Junior has to be a workaholic, and then Neymar remains as the weak link in terms of the counter press. But yes, the absence of Lucas Paqueta may go for him that opportunity to come and show what he's capable of, or that he can still impact play. Otherwise, we could see, is it Diallo? Is it Diallo? What's his name? In that midfield. He came on very late on in that game against Japan. He came on quite very late on in that game, because ordinarily it's going to be Casemiro and Bruno Guimaraes. So what's his name? I'm trying to remember. Yes, Danilo Santos from Botafogo. Could he be accommodated in a conservative role and then you use Bruno Guimaraes as your 10? Because that's also a possibility. Given how Bruno Guimaraes is comfortable on the ball, even going forward, it could be that he takes that variation, you know? So we'll have to wait and see how Carlo Ancelotti tweaks things up. Okay. McKenna says, I'm English and also a Newcastle fan. I just know Wissa is going to bank in a hat-trick. Oh, so what are you rooting for? Are you rooting for Yohan Wissa or you're rooting for England? You know, I understand being caught between two stools or between a rock and a hard stone, but perhaps the decision for you is simple. But I'm sure Newcastle fans out there will be hoping to see Yohan Wissa thrive. Brazil, unfortunately, suffering with injuries. Yeah, it's part of the game. Yes, Lucas Paqueta is out. Rafinha is out. There's another player. Obviously, Wesley got out. That was prior to even the start of the World Cup and was replaced by Anderson. Maybe we even get to see an Anderson in that midfield. You never know. But yeah, injuries are doing them a bit dirty in that regard. Gradaus says Bruno Guimaraes is a class player. Is a class player, dude. You're lucky having him in your midfield. Summer, this is Ken Summer. You say, hello, Tera, long time. No see, good to see you alive and kicking. More positive energy to you. Thank you so much, Summer. Do you remember what I said about German? I was right. See, you are right indeed, Summer. You are right. Fuz Edits, hello to you too. Fuz Edits does join us from Norway. Congratulations, Team Norway. Upon advancing to the round of 16, you will be up against Brazil. You can give us your expectations, Fuz Edits, on that regard. Guys, how are we doing with our poll question? I can see 25 votes. The record is at 26 votes. So you had better it. We do not want to decline. You know, we need to keep on improving in these poll questions. Okay. Sema, sorry, McKenna, responding to Gradao Games, says he's an icon. I hope he stays and becomes a legend. Like Shira, contract talks are underway to stave off Arsenal. Let's see how that one goes. England should use more set pieces. I think we had discussed that, Mitchell. You're right about that. Because sometimes England struggles creatively, even when they have an ability. Is a Morgan Rogers, a Marcus Rashford, a Noni Madueke, a Bukayo Saka. Sometimes they struggle to create from open play. So, and yet they can get their wingers involved. If they can win those dead ball situations, maybe they can look to leverage on set pieces more. So you're right about that. McKenna, England's main problem is we have no right backs, and Kane drops too deep. Now, when it comes to right backs, yes, you have your injuries, but Dejan Space can play as a right back. You have McKay can play as a right back, and that means John Stones would have to come back into that centre back role. Maybe a Danban, I don't know. You're not short of options, really. You're not short of options. It's about Thomas Tuchel to get things right and find the right solutions. But it is true that Brechy James is out through injury. Let's see. Is Tino Livramento part of that squad? I don't remember. You know, I don't remember particularly well. Tino Livramento is in that squad. So he's a right back. You can use him. Okay. You talked about Hurricane dropping too deep. Now, Hurricane is now accustomed to that way of playing because that's what has been sort of nurtured in him or instigated in him while playing at Bayern Munich. So, but it also works well for them that when he vacates that central area, usually Jude Bellingham runs in and occupies it. So I don't look at it as a bad thing. The question is, how do you help him get, or how do you then exploit that to get the best out of the team? quit looking at it as a problem and look at it as an opportunity of, because, for example, if it drops too deep and by doing that, it gets to manage maybe to drag away the attention of a defender or two, it could give then a Jude Bellingham the opportunity to run into that vacant space and be the man, finding himself in the final third. Okay. McKenna says it works for Munich, but we do not have Gnabry and Odyssey. you have players that you can turn into that. That's why I was talking about Jude Bellingham. Then whoever plays off the right wing should be should be your Odyssey, whether it's a Bukayo Saka, whether it's a Noni Madueke, maybe it may be a little too much to ask of Noni Madueke. Okay. Nando says, in Mbappe we trust. Kylian Mbappe making all the history and wonders at the World Cup. Thanks so much, Nando. Sama says, I think Declan Rice will not be subbed off because he cannot be subbed in the second half for tactical reasons. He will play the first half because he's very good in standing traditional football. Okay. When Ken drops deep, so does everybody. That's the wrong thing. That's the wrong thing. But when you go back to the game against Croatia, every time Ken dropped, Jude Bellingham was occupying that space. It's why we are struggling creatively. Sama says, who, in my opinion, should be subbed off, even though I am a Madrid fan, is Jude Bellingham, unfortunately. It is Jude Bellingham, unfortunately, because Kobe fits the central midfield role. He's also not a creator, so that's where England are suffering. Now, you see, Jude Bellingham is not that creative player. He's not a Bruno Fernandes. He's not a Michael Olisen, a 10-year-old. He's not your Cole Palmer, He's not your Jack Grealish. He's just different. He's more of a Lampard, by the way. That's how I look at him. That's how I look at Jude Bellingham. He's more of a flank Lampard. Okay. I think the score will be 3-1. That's Fool's edits. 3-1 Brazil. Oh, in favor of Brazil or no way of beating Brazil? Fool's edits. Gradal Game says, I'm Brazilian and I think it will be a very tough match against Norway. Haaland is a goal scoring machine. That's true. You think so? It's going to be a hard match. Livramento got injured. That's very unfortunate. But like I said, you have solutions within those defensive areas. Before it even started, we are playing Konsa at right back. Wouldn't you be better off playing Mark Gehi at right back because he's played there before? And he also played in a back three at Crystal Palace as the right-sided center back, I think. Then we didn't take Trent Alexander-Arnold. We cannot cry over spilled milk. Then we have no right backs. I understand that. So, but we'll wait and see how the exploits go about. What solutions that Thomas Tuchel tries to find within his game, So, anyways, on the part of transfers, Tottenham Hotspur remain committed to sign Sandro Tonali, even after agreeing a deal to sign Matthias Fernandes from West Ham for £85 million. So that deal is close to being sealed. Mr. Kex, hi. You say hi, Mr. Kex. So that deal is almost done, but they are not yet done. They are not yet done. They are not yet done. Far from done, Farouk says he's talking about Spurs. Farouk, aka Gladiator says Spurs continuously spoiling the markets. Well, Man City set the precedent, and it's going to clubs are going to struggle by the in this transfer window. They'll get business done, but it is going to come quite expensively because they've allowed themselves to soil the market. I'll never stop saying this. Those big clubs need to have a kitchen cabinet. A kitchen cabinet where you sit and discuss and say, look, guys, we are all, or majority of you, are interested in signing player A, B, C, D. But please, let's agree that nobody should spend in the excess of this amount of money. Because I, for one, believe that part of the reason as to why some of these clubs are spending so highly on these players, it is a vote of no confidence in their own scouting departments. In years gone by, obviously the circumstances were a bit different. But even big teams scouted players from lesser teams, or little known talents, and they came and delivered. At one point, we talked about Patrice Evra, we talked about Nemanja Vidic. These are not players that cost an arm and a leg to United, but it was the decent work of scouting, that you go out there at an FC Porto, at a Braga, somewhere at Laurier, at Auxerre, at a Paris FC, at a Hoffenheim, at a Bologna, and scouts that decent player that is going to come and hit the ground running and be a difference. Now, it's like these big clubs have left that role to mid-table teams to go and scout the talent, come and use it, polish it up, or give it the chance to test it out. And once it works, then they come calling. So I want these big clubs to have a kitchen cabinet where they say, okay, Yan Diomande is on the market. Liverpool, PSG, you're all interested. But let's agree that that player is not worth 100 million euros. The most he should be going for is 75 million pounds. And if that is your stance and you all agree, then you can force the market in a certain direction in the long run. It's not a sort of short-term position, because in you committing to that, you must be willing to take certain sacrifices, So, but if Manchester City have agreed to pay 116 million pounds for Elliot Anderson, Aston Villa are going to say Morgan Rogers is worth more than that for us. And that's why they are talking about a fee of 130 million pounds. Present day, PSG are saying Bradley Barcola is worth more to them in the excess of 116 million pounds. Why? Because Man City have committed themselves to paying that to Nottingham Forest. So basically, that's how the market is being soiled in a way. How such players are costing 85 million pounds, what has he done? Exactly, because he had a fairly good season with Southampton, they got relegated. A fairly good season with West Ham, they got relegated. And somehow he's costing 85 million pounds. And West Ham are there making a profit in the excess of 45 million pounds after just 1 year, I'm just glad it means Newcastle keep Tonali. Well, it does not guarantee that Newcastle keep Tonali. What it does mean is that Newcastle are going to make the argument, if you want Sandro Tonali, he's a more proven player than Matheus Fernandes. And if Matheus Fernandes is worth 85 million pounds to you, then, Tonali is worth 100 million pounds, if not plus. So that's basically the implications of it. Yes, I can understand City spending on an English player. Now, the case of the English player is that if you're buying an English player, there's an English player tax. If you're a big team buying, there's a big team tax. And then there's a Premier player proven tax. So I'll give an example. If Everton went to West Ham demanding to sign Matheus Fernandes, West Ham would know that there is nowhere in the world Everton are going to lay out 85 million pounds for the player. The utmost they would have gone for is maybe 60 to 65 million pounds, and maybe a percentage sell on future sell on clause. But because it is Man City, it's Arsenal, it's Newcastle, it's Man United that are competing for this player, the price goes up. That's the big team, tax. So the same applies to Elliot Anderson. If it was Newcastle pushing to resign Elliot Anderson, at most, he would have cost 80 million pounds. Maybe future add-ons rising to 85, 90 million pounds. But because it is Man City, the big team tax comes in, So those are some of the elements that I think come at play when it comes to these acquisitions. Finished 17th twice in a row, the big six. That's our Spurs. I think Spurs might assign Tonali for 100 million pounds and break their transfer record second time in a week. That's a possibility. He counts as a homegrown player. Well, I mean, whether he counts as a homegrown player, whether he counts as an indigenous player, as whatever player, for me, it doesn't change much. It doesn't change much. And now, I've seen the justification to say inflation, whatnot, inflation or otherwise, of what he would have cost maybe 2-3 years ago. For me, it's about the quality of the player and being as significant to say, because, okay, if he's costing 116 million pounds, let's rewind it back to 2-3 years ago. How much Rodri would be costing then? With all his quality, how much should he be costing? So you have to also think about it in those terms. I think they should revise the financial fair play rules. Otherwise, we are to see many transfers in the direction of the Isak deal. I mean, I don't even know how they're going to go about this. But those financial fair play rules were revised. And there's a new implementation that has to come at play, I think, at the start of next season. Certain permutations were changed. I do not remember precisely what they were, Then those big clubs should chase away the recruitment departments and scouts, because such buys, even who didn't choose scouting as a job, can identify players they are buying. I understand where you're coming from, Mitchell. I understand where you're coming from. My eyes, Spurs should look to finish anywhere between first and sixth. Okay. McKenna responding to Farouk, is saying they are changing today to SCR, squad cost ratio. That is from UEFA. The squad cost ratio is more of a UEFA thing. You have to include a certain number of homegrown players for European squads. It is a rule. Yes, I understand the rule, and I'm not saying do not sign homegrown players. I'm simply saying just because you're a homegrown player does not mean you should cost an arm and a leg. It's the case of saying of buying, let's say, vegetables more expensively than beef. Yes, they are grown in the ground, but should we over-exaggerate their prices just because they grew in some form of fertile soil? Nah, not for me. Not for me. So I understand that clubs try to add to, because when it comes to homegrown players, Man City have lots of those in their academy that they can pull into the first squad. So it's about them identifying a player and thinking this is a player that we need. That's all okay. But the more clubs commit to paying expensively, now just imagine if Arsenal were to, let's say, pay anywhere between 120 to 125 million pounds for Morgan Rogers. What would that mean for the market? What does that mean for Real Madrid's pursuit of Michael Olise? Because for every price a player is bought at, you have set precedent for the rest of the market to say, for this club to say, look, this player who we think ours is even better cost that. So there's no way we are taking lesser of that. In the long run, and this is something Arsene Wenger said many years ago, that you'll have more players running down their contracts and leaving for free. And then remember, when it comes to signing players, the amount you agree to pay for a player, there's also agent fees or commissions, and then there's the player's salary. So, in other words, players are costing more and more. So, you also ought to factor that in. Newcastle just got fined $3 million yesterday for breaching it. That's by UEFA. Even Aston Villa, there's a 15 million euro fine on them for squad cost ratio, and I think the other should be Chelsea. There's a couple of clubs that are being sanctioned for violating the squad cost ratio. You remember, because what Aston Villa did was to sell their women's team to the subsidiary of the company that owns them to balance their books as per the Premier League. But then UEFA does not take that into account. If you have an asset of a club that you sell to a subsidiary of the club owners, they do not count that. That's what Chelsea did a year ago. They sold the 2 team hotels at Stamford Bridge to a subsidiary of Blueco, and for about £76 million, and then sold the female team. That's where Aston Villa, picked a leaf from to do the same thing, and the Premier League accepted that, but UEFA said, no, we're not taking that nonsense. That's why they ended up being penalized. So the squad cost ratio rules are with the UEFA. So the profit and sustainability rules are with the Premier League. And I think Everton have been somewhere caught in the crossfires with the Premier League for PSR rules. So, anyways, okay. But I like the discussion that you guys are having in the comment section. Spurs lacks in midfield for a ball carrier and passer. Looks like they found it. Can you talk about the World Cup? That's a Dreamer. We spent 1 hour and 45 minutes talking about the World Cup, really. Going through yesterday's games and one of the games to come our way today. It's quite unfortunate that you missed the World Cup talk, but if you do not mind, subscribe to the channel. And after this broadcast, you can go back and revisit the conversation, because I think it may be, although I may want to serve you personally, it may be a bit unjust for all our other colleagues that have been there for the last 1 hour or so listening to the World Cup conversation if I have to track back for the benefit of you. So my humble request would be kindly subscribe to the channel, and at the end of this broadcast, you can go back and rewatch it from the beginning, and you'll pick all our thoughts on the World Cup, and maybe perhaps in our subsequent broadcasts, we can also continue to carry on with the World Cup talk. But thank you so much, Dreamer. McKenna says, no, it's UK also. SCR is replacing PSR. It does, as if you just bought off foreign players, you wouldn't be able to play them. That's true. Mark Goldbridge is blaming United owners again. Why? He's blaming them because they missed out on Matas Fernandes. I mean, guys, let's agree. The one thing I often remind myself of is that those clubs, as much as we support them, they are businesses to certain individuals. And those businesses are run a certain way. It's the same way you wake up and say, you're going to buy a carpet for your shop or for your workspace, and then another person will say, nah, we do not need a carpet. That's a luxury for us. So when it comes to these clubs, they have a valuation of certain players. And if they believe that the player is being excessively valued, or there's a mismatch, a big mismatch between the valuation of a player and the valuation of the selling club, then they will opt out of the deal. It's not the first time this is happening. Man City opted out of a deal for Fran Wirtz because of that, So take that also into consideration. Like, I understand as a fan, or as fans, we want our clubs to be ambitious. We want them. We want our clubs to go toe to toe financially, even with the the other big clubs that we intend to compete with. But like I said, for me, the idea that all these big clubs must be linked to a particular player and then end up being priced out is a failure or an indictment on the scouting departments of these clubs. So I do not think, anyways, I think if they do more, they can go and identify talent that is less expensive but can do equally the same job. Now, if we are comparing players, what's the significant gap in quality between Ayubu Buadi or Anoy and Matas Fernandez? Think of it that way. Okay. Farouk says, and Guimaraes has a release clause of 70 million, but Newcastle want 80 million pounds. Now, I've seen the reports pertaining to the release clause. Some sources have denied the idea that there is a release clause. Others continue to suggest that there is such a thing as a release clause, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, sometimes release clauses are conditional. I'll give you an example. Release clauses sometimes have an expiry date. So, for example, it could say, let's say, if a team comes for you before the 15th of July, they are allowed to pay 70 million pounds. If they come after 15th July, they'll need to negotiate and pay more. I think Anton Semenyo's deal had something similar to that effect when he was at Bournemouth. So that could be also a situation. McKenna, you say, so it comes to premium. There is no release clause for Bruno. It ran out 2 years ago. Okay. It's always Chelsea. Literally every rule, always Chelsea. Subbed and liked. Thank you so much, McKenna. Mitchell says Spurs always buys in every transfer, but players end up spending time in the gym, spending time in the sick bay than on the pitch. It's a bit unfortunate what the sort of struggles they've had with injuries, particularly last season. When you look at James Maddison, when you look at Dominic Solanke had his spells out, Dejan Kulusevski, Lucas Bagville was a suspect at some point. At the tail end of the season, Xavi Simons joined. Mohamed Kudus had already joined that tail. So they've had their struggles with injuries, really. By the way, speaking of injuries, Arsenal have had to overhaul their medical department. Is it Ezekiel or something? Okay, not Ezekiel. The first team doctor, fired. Head of performance, gone. Head of sports science, gone. Why? I told you guys during the course of the season that Arsenal had done an independent review of their they brought in an independent physio to assess why they were having so many injuries, because they had in the excess of 32 injuries last season. So what they did was to bring in an independent physio, somebody that is a friend to Mikel Arteta. They work together at Everton. So he went through the squad, analyzed what he had to analyze, and the conclusion they drew out to was that they overhauled the medical department. So I think Tom Allen, the head of sports science, is one of those that have left. So in a couple of years ago, even Tottenham suffered a bit of a fate. Arsenal lost their first team doctor, Dr. Oskol, I think Oskol something, who left for Manchester United. And then they brought in somebody new who had worked at Crystal Palace and Liverpool. Now, Tottenham underwent something similar, and their medical department was sort of disrupted. Ever since then, the replacements may have not been just as good. So they need to do some work in there. So all those things are happening. Sam Wilson. Okay. Guys, okay. Your comments are coming in thick and fast. But let me see what I can do. Is any player worth 100 million? Yes. There are some players that are worth 100 million pounds. When you talk about players like Lamine Yamal, Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., Mike Olise, and many others out there, I think they are worth that. And the reason I think they are worth that, we're talking about players that are going to bring you the quality on the pitch, but also are going to come with a lot of commercial value to them. I'll give you an example. Today, if you signed, let's say, Kylian Mbappe for £200 million, be rest assured you'll make back that money within a space of 1 to 2 years. Why? Because he brings the football on the pitch, but also he has a commercial value to him. You're going to sell a lot of Kylian Mbappe shirts. So clubs also look at that business element of it, you know. That's why you see players like Cristiano Ronaldo were highly sought after. Lionel Messi. Why? Because they come with the football, but they also bring the commercial bit to them. That's why I talk about branding. And I feel like Michael Olise has not branded himself so well, you know, put himself out there more, because I believe he's a player that has a great commercial value, you know. So there's that. Hi Viola, how are you doing? Good to have you on the podcast. Okay, let me run through your comments as fast as I can. John says, hello, it's a lot of money. Yes, it is a lot of money, but you can make it back. Remember when Real Madrid signed Cristiano Ronaldo for £80 million in 2009? They made that money in a single season because he came with the commercial. A bit when... Apologies on that slight internet glitch. When the Italian Serie A took Cristiano Ronaldo, that was Juventus signing him. He brought in he brought back the viewership, the eyes back onto the Italian Serie A. So the commercial value sometimes is worth it. Okay, let me run through your comments before internet betrays me once again. If you guess my country, I'll give you. I think about giving you $100. That's John Ross. Huh. Your guess is as good as mine. Your guess is as good as mine. But I'll say UK. Okay, McKenna says, okay, you only get 3 guesses. Okay, UK is the first one. I'm studying your pick. My country has red and white. I didn't know that. I'd not read that yet, but I went for, if it has red and white, I've gone with UK first. Let me see. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm trying not to skip people's comments so that I do not enrage people for having skipped their comments. But they're starting to run up really, really fast. Okay. Oh, okay. I think I'm going to go from up and down. I'll be happy. I'm stupid for saying that. MB, speak in tongue. Jesus Christ. I don't understand some of those comments, guys, that you're writing. I don't understand some of them. Did you use Google to know my country? Who used Google? I don't know. I'm not sure any country is 99% Christian. Okay. All those, actually, Spurs have had to dismiss their physio before wasting too much on transfer. Otherwise, it may be the same story. Yeah, a lot of things. I think we undervalue the importance of these other people at the club when it comes to maybe the medical department, nutrition department, and things like that. So, and yet a player's greatest value to a club is being available for selection in the first place. So no matter how good you are on the ball, if you're constantly not available, you're going to be of very little value to your club. Okay. Margot Bridge is just a winner fellow. The transfer has just begun and he is there complaining. He loves to complain. That's why his audience love him for always being a bit controversial, going out and, calling out the club on things that he thinks should be done a certain way. And sometimes, to be fair, he has valid reasons for, for complaining. Especially if you're desperate for your club to do well and you want it back at the top as soon as yesterday, and when you're noticing or recognizing a continuously growing gap between your competitors and where you expect your club to be. So sometimes he's justified, but sometimes he goes a little bit overboard. Sometimes it's just my assessment of it. Okay, we only play rugby. You only play rugby. I don't know what country only plays rugby. But you said you had white and red in there. I don't think Canada is really known for rugby. They have red and white in their flag. Japan do have a white and red. There's a red dot at the center. I don't think they are predominantly known for rugby. So our famous food is Lou. 99% people. Oh, you are giving hints. Oh, okay. Okay. I think I failed on that prediction. I'll accept on that. Let's move on. McKenna says, I'm gonna do. Do you think Matthias would start at United if bought? Yeah, he would be brought in as a starter. He'll be brought in as a starter. You do not pay 85 million pounds or 80 million pounds for a player like that, and he's not going to be a starter. He would be a starter. Whether he would actually hack it, that's a whole different story. But he would be a starter. Okay, you look handsome. Thank you. In return, I'll teach you. Jesus Christ. Okay, so in the other transfer news, I've told you about Arsenal having their attention on Bradley Barcola, but I've stayed for a long time in this live stream, and I'm kind of liking it. Thank you. So Arsenal want to sign Bradley Barcola, and Liverpool are equally interested. But first of all, PSG do not want to sell, but they say if they are to sell, they value the player north of 116 million pounds. And again, this is because precedent has been set in the market. Then Liverpool's pursuit for a winger has linked them to Belgian attacker. That's Matthias Fernandez Pedro, 21, who plays for Lille. That's according to Express. This is as compiled by BBC Sport, obviously. Then Chelsea want to target Elliot Junior Kropi. That would mean maybe Nicholas Jackson or Liam Delap. One of those could be heading out. I do not know if that is the case, but that's according to Court Offside. Then, Farouk is predicting New Zealand. New Zealand. Okay. Then Everton are looking to complete a deal to sign Tariq George from Chelsea for about 20 million pounds. There's a way Chelsea sell their players expensively and clubs keep buying. Somebody justified to me how Burnley paid 20 million pounds for Armando Broja. Now Everton are committing 20 million pounds to Tariq George. Arsenal agreed to pay 48 for Noni Madueke, plus 4 in expected add-ons. Something, I don't know. I don't know what those Americans are doing. But when it comes to selling players, they are making the money. So, okay, then then Manchester City, Man United, and Bayern Munich have joined Arsenal in expressing their interest for Ayubu Buadi. We've discussed that previously. Then also Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United, and Borussia Dortmund want to sign Keishu Sano. That's from the 23-year-old. No, sorry, 25-year-old from Mainz, the Japanese midfielder. So then Tottenham, apparently this has been reported weeks ago, that they have an agreement on personal terms with Sandro Tonali. What they have failed to agree on yet is the price tag for Sandro Tonali. Then Samuel Chukwueze wants to stay at AC Milan. So there's that. And apparently Brentford are looking to sign Callum Wilson. And I'm thinking to myself, West Ham, what do you want to do with Callum Wilson? Sorry, Brentford, what do you want to do with Callum Wilson? Then Manchester United had direct contact with Marcus Rashford camp. Talks were termed as amicable or okay. The they want to welcome him back to start preseason with the rest of the team. There are no guarantees that he will stay. That's according to Fabrizio Romano. If a decent offer comes in for him, they'll let him go, but they are willing to reintegrate him back in the fold. And for me, I've said, looking at what Manchester United have on their left wing, I don't think they have a player that is better than Marcus Rashford. I don't think so. And given that it is Michael Adrian Carrick in charge now, is it too hard to call for water under the bridge? Let bygones be bygones. Let him have a fresh start. Now, if they want to cut ties, that's still up to them. But I'm thinking of it that way. So if he does leave, I've recommended a team like Chelsea could use him. A team like Tottenham Hotspur could use him. A team like Newcastle could use a player of his services. Lots of teams around could use a player of his services. And he's going for only £40 million, unless you're Liverpool or Man City. So Man City may charge more. But I feel that there's still a decent player in there, in the 28-year-old. But obviously, what will put off most of his suitors are his wages. He's on really, really exorbitant wages. Anywhere in the excess of 300 grand a week. So unless he's willing to take a pay cut. So Matthias Fernandez has been permitted to undergo his medical as a new Spurs player. And then the expectation remains that movement is expected for Bradley Barcola. And yesterday there were Arsenal scouts watching Bradley Barcola specifically in that game between France and Sweden. And I'm sure they must have been impressed just as much as I was. I've said this before. I would sign Bradley Barcola ahead of Morgan Rogers if I were Arsenal. But Arsenal have Morgan Rogers as their priority target. But should they miss out on the 23-year-old England forward, then they will switch their attention to the French star. So there's that. Then Juventus did agree a deal worth about 16 million euros to sign Jeff Ekota. So he's joining in from Genoa. So that deal does include David Posca moving in the opposite direction. So Lamine Yamal was speaking in praise of Vinicius Jr. Okay, let me get through some of your comments before we sign out this afternoon. I can see it's already 6 minutes past midday. We should be signing out very soon. It's been 2 hours and 27 minutes thus far. Okay. Let me see. Chelsea are just scammers. That Madueke sale, they wanted to sell Jackson to Bayern for around 80 million. Chelsea. In what world is Nicholas Jackson worth 80 million? Jesus Christ. Anyways, but even the teams that are being scammed, what does that say about them? I remember making a video about Chelsea being money launderers. And it all revolved around how they did their transfer business. Okay, Mitchell says, let Marcus Rashford leave United and let United not bring him back. He has done enough for them. Farouk says, I'm in support for Rashford to stay to re-establish himself. Okay, looks like I do share a similar school of thought there with you. If you can guess my favorite anime, be shocked. John Arras, it's going to be your pick. Rashford is going to score 3 goals today. Mark my words. We'll be here, Jalin. Hopefully you're right. Wouldn't that excite Manchester United fans? There's okay. You're from Brazil, Jalin. Okay. Anyways, so there's that bit, but lots of our transfer business is making the rounds, and there's a lot of gossip and speculation. I try not to dwell too much on all the gossip and speculation. That's why I try to filter out some of what is most important. But we cannot sign out without talking about Ronald Koeman. He has stepped down as the Dutch national team head coach. I think it was bound to happen once Netherlands were eliminated at the hands of Morocco. I sort of expected that. Julian Nagelsmann has said he will not be stepping down unless the DFB decide to sack him to put an end to that journey. So I do not know what will happen, but by the end of the World Cup, expect lots of teams to have changed their national team managers. Tunisia were the first during the course of the World Cup, and they brought in Hervé Renard. It did not change their fortunes, but I think they'll hold on to Hervé Renard because I think they have a good team, and it could brighten their chances for AFCON 2027. And then maybe if he sticks around long enough, maybe there are chances for the World Cup 2030 that will be hosted by Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. Of course, some games will be played in Uruguay, and I think Argentina to commemorate the centurion or the World Cup turning 100 years. But yeah, Ronald Koeman has stepped away following their World Cup exit at the hands of Paraguay. He said, I decided last night that it is time to step down as head coach of the Netherlands. We all shared the dream of making history at this World Cup, but we fell short. No one is more disappointed by that than I am. As head coach, the responsibility ultimately rests with me. As soon as I saw his resignation, I remember thinking to myself, Africans never resign. They'd rather be forced out. Okay, McKenna responding to, okay. No, this is not fresh. I almost read the wrong comments. Okay. Portugal's underperforming in this World Cup. Portugal have already announced that Roberto Martinez will leave at the end of the World Cup. So Croatia wins today. So as soon as you see Portugal's exit, that will imply an exit for Roberto Martinez. And I don't know why they announced that during the course of the World Cup. In my head, I was thinking, didn't you keep that to yourself? If you're not racist, then say, I love black people 3 times. I do not need to say that 3 times to validate myself. No, I don't need the validation. I have my convictions and I have no problem with black people. So later on, do I look white to you? Okay. Let's see. What's the other news? Yes, Chelsea are looking to sign Pepe Chavaria, yes, from Rayo Vallecano as a replacement for Marc Cucurella. So that deal is being worked on as things go. Then there's an expectation that Kepa Arrizabalaga could leave Arsenal as he seeks a starting role somewhere else. So, and Arsenal looking at there's a goalkeeper at Leeds that they are looking at as a possible replacement. So we'll keep our eyes to that. Guys, obviously there's more news than that when it comes to the world of transfers, but we cannot cover it all. That's the best we could do for this morning/afternoon. Thank you so much. You've been such an incredible audience, including 4 hat-tricks, 60 goals, 57 in 13 games in a row. Oh, my outside bet is Norway. Haaland is insane. Literally, all you have to do is give him one chance. I expected more from Portugal, even though they won by 5 goals. Okay, that's understandable. Thank you so much, McKenna. Thank you so much, John Russ. Thank you so much, thank you so much, Farouk, aka Gladiator. Thank you so much, Mitchell Wine Squats. Let me see, Viola. Thank you so much, Blastoise. It was a pleasure to have you on the broadcast as always. I hope I don't Gradao Games Fuzz Edits. Thank you so much for having been part of the broadcast. Patata, it was a pleasure. Ricky, Nando, Khan, Tayon Khan, thank you so much. Ash, user, always a pleasure. Kuyasi the gamer, thank you so much. Ash, and every single one of you that is, Archie Morrison, you are back, but we are signing out. It's been 2 hours and 34 minutes of us being here. So I would wish to to retire before I expire, because I aspire to inspire. So maybe you would indulge yourself sometime to go back and watch the entire broadcast as it has gone on. But Jalin, thank you so much. And NSH, and every single one of you that has been part of this morning's podcast, thank you so much for making it worthwhile for us. Until next time, be blessed, have a blessed new month, and take good care of yourselves. I will link up later. Best duo, Haaland and Odegaard, if you say so. And we'll be back tonight for the conversation. As the case is always, we'll be back at 11 p.m. East African time. Stay blessed. Bye-bye for now. Peace.